It's Hardline. Good morning. This is Dave Debo. 803-0930 is the number. A little bit later this half hour, we will be taking your calls. We're talking about the Buffalo Bills lease for Ralph Wilson Stadium. The lead negotiator for Erie County was Rich Tobe, the deputy county executive. He's here. We're going to start by going through what's in the deal, and we'll pick up certainly on all of those economic arguments. He's someone, obviously. He worked on this deal. He was up until midnight, night after night after night, pushing this deal forward. So he's someone who's going to have a little bit different opinion than you heard from Bruce Fisher in the last segment. He thinks it's worth it. We're going to talk about that. We'll take your calls too. 803-0930 is the number. Rich, thanks for coming on in.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Dave. Nice to be here.
What is in this deal?
Yeah, I thought what we'd do is first run through the deal. It's complicated, and in the flurry of activity on Friday, some of the details didn't really play out well in the media. So I'd like to spend just a few minutes laying out what actually occurred. The length of the lease is 10 years.
Right. But after 7, it changes.
What the Bills sought was a glimpse at what the future of football will be. And that glimpse comes when the player's contract that's now in effect lapses and they go into a new contract.
Okay.
So they sought a one-time window to see how the new player's contract and the new TV contract will affect them. So if they wish to leave at the end of the 7th year, they can do so by paying about $28 million.
All right.
If they don't exercise that option, player's contract's okay, TV contract's okay, they stay for the full 10 years.
What if they decide, say, to leave tomorrow?
Right. They have made an ironclad pledge to stay.
Okay.
They've put it in the document. They've said it publicly. But should something change and they decide to leave, we have a non-relocation agreement that is as binding as our lawyers could make it. And the Bills really didn't dispute our efforts to make it as legally binding as possible. There's a lot of law that goes into one of these. But in the end, we have the right to what's called specific performance, but is more commonly known as an injunction.
Which specific performance means?
We can go to court, and the Bills have agreed the court will be here in Erie County, either federal or state, but it will be here. And we can go to court and say they're breaking the lease, they're breaking the non-relocation agreement. We want a court order mandating that they stay.
That they stay. Okay.
Should that fail, the backup, sort of the belts and suspenders, is a $400 million payment the Bills will have to make to the state and county to exercise their leaving. It's not an option to leave, it's a contract violation. And they've agreed that that's a rough estimate of the damages that this community would feel if they broke the contract and left.
All right. So that's right now.
Yes.
That's $29 million if they decide to leave in year 7.
Right.
Facing a new CBA.
Right.
What about years 8, 9, 10?
The non-relocation agreement remains in effect, and the specific performance or injunction and the $400 million liquidated damages kick in again. So there'll be a date that we've got to agree on, but it'll be, as it now is, in February probably. If they don't exercise the option by that date, they're bound to stay. Right now, we have a similar arrangement, although it ran for most of 10 years, where each year in February the Bills could say they're going to exercise what was then a yearly option to relocate and pay an amount.
And the team hates it when anyone mentions this, but Ralph Wilson is not a young man.
Right.
All of this would stay in effect were he not on the scene?
Yes, this agreement is with the team, the franchise, and some of the things that we negotiated was to make sure that both the league makes any new owner fully aware that they are bound by these clauses. We'll have a document to that effect in which the league will say it, we will say it, the contracts will say it, and the team, the franchise, is bound by this, not the individuals involved.
And a new owner would be buying that franchise and all of the stuff you just described.
Yes. Just the way they're buying the players' contracts, they'll be buying this lease.
All right. Why is this lease not why will there never be another Rolling Stones concert in Orchard Park? Why is this an exclusive lease with the Bills?
Well, first of all, the Bills have the right to hold concerts. They hold over 100 events a year at the stadium now. I've got a list of them. But what's happened with the major events is that I believe the music business has changed so much, they don't want to take the risk of bad weather events for one of these major concerts now that have so much electronics involved, so much setup, often pyrotechnics. Bad weather could drown a concert, and they don't want it.
They don't want the liability, the financial liability
of a bad weather event. So what they end up doing is holding these concerts now in indoor venues. They might hold it at First Niagara Center here, or in the very big events in dome stadiums. They're not holding them outside very much at all.
The governor's announcement referred to this deal as a $130 million deal. how much of that is a taxpayer obligation? How much of that is a team obligation?
First of all, the deal is $130 million for capital to build the stadium. There are other costs, which we will go into.
Okay.
But roughly it's $90 million of public sector capital and roughly $35-40 million for the bills. I can give you the exact numbers, but we're like $94 million and they're like $35 million.
In a general sense, what are we obligated to do as taxpayers? What are they obligated to do as the team?
Well, first of all, the first thing to bear in mind is that this deal follows the last one very closely. The total cost to the taxpayers, even though the deal is a lot more expensive, the total cost to the taxpayers over the coming 10 years is only $11 million more than the current lease. So it's $11 million more split between the state and the county. A fairly modest amount. The deal itself is so much more expensive because the bills are throwing in the difference. So the bills are putting in $35 million of capital, and they're putting in roughly $10 million of rent. Hence, the deal gets to around $270 million total. But our cost to the taxpayers has only gone up that small amount. With regard to the construction, the $130 million, all of our money will go into a common fund, and we'll all be paying more or less for the same items, the improvements that will take place in the stadium.
And what is the split involving New York State and Erie County?
It's a complicated deal, but it starts with, as between us, not including the bill share, the state's at 57% and we're at 43%. That's true for construction, and that's what it was last time. For the operating expenses, it starts at 57-43 between us, and it trends towards 50-50 in the out years for the operating expenses. The weighted average has us about 54% state, 46% county.
Where does our money go? What will we be building there?
Okay. Well, first of all, all of us, the bills, the counties, and the state, will be building a series of improvements to the stadium. It's important to bear in mind that this started at a request from the bills for $230 million almost. It was $228 million. The improvements break down between technology, which includes a new video scoreboard on the east end, so there'll be one at each end of the stadium, a whole variety of telecommunications improvements to enhance high-definition TV for people who are watching at home, a variety of changes like that, upgrades to the circulation, including a big new plaza on Abbott Road, branding and profiling, relocating the team store, and a variety of things of that sort. Just renovations of the current space. It hasn't been substantially renovated in quite a while, and there's a whole series of changes that will take place, including the concessionaires, improvements to the kitchens, improvements to the way food is sold. And then there are some improvements that the team wanted to the training facility and their operations center, and there'll be some changes in the press box and things like that.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about how the deal was done. And yes, then, of course, there are those economic arguments. You heard last hour, or in the first half hour, rather, there was a lot of discussion about how this is a gift from the taxpayers. Rich has an argument against that, too. We'll get to that right after this. It's Hardline on News Radio 930 AM, 107.7 FM, WBEN. 803-0930 is our number. If you get on board now, we'll be going to calls right after the news break. Rich Tobe is here, Deputy Erie County Executive, the man who, for the most part, was Erie County's lead negotiator at the table, hammering out the deal for Ralph Wilson Stadium. It is, again, if you're just joining us, it was announced on Friday. Overall, it's a deal that includes about $130 million in upgrades to Ralph Wilson Stadium. It's about, what did you say, Rich, 54?
It's 57-43 between the state and the county, percentage split.
Okay.
And the bills are in for $35 million of that, capital construction.
Now, address the argument, and it was made in the prior segment, that this is money that taxpayers are putting up, and it's going to just go into Ralph Wilson's pockets in Detroit. That there's no multiplier effect here. There's no real impact on our local economy. We are subsidizing some guy who's taking money out of the area.
It's an important argument. There's another very important argument about what the public wants, which we believe is to keep the team here. But the economics can't be ignored. And
we'll get to the psychic, the psychological benefits in a second. But if we're looking strictly on economic terms, return on investment.
Yes.
Is there an ROI here?
Yes, there's a substantial one. 16 years ago, we had the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership help us with an economic study. They showed that there was a positive benefit to having the team here. but not an overwhelming one. There's a positive economic development benefit, but not a giant one. What we did this year was, rather than go through that exercise again, we looked at just one key data point, and that is how much money New York State collects in personal income tax because the team's here. They would have none of it if the team was not here, and they have this very large number because they are.
You're talking withholding on player salaries.
Yes. So the total salaries for players, front office, and some non-taxable benefits in 1 year is $168 million. That's the Buffalo Bills payroll, as they've told it to us. They do withholding tax upon that, and just from the team, that yields $140 million to New York State over the 10 years of this lease.
And so, the overall package we're looking at here is less than that.
Yes, the total cost of the stadium improvements is $130 million. So, so this is a small positive just from that. The state's not paying that whole amount. The Bills are paying some of it. We're paying some of it. But we expect that because these players are all New York State tax residents, all of their income, not just from the team, from their salaries, goes there. But over 10 years, $140 million to New York State personal income tax. The team reports that to us, reports it to the state. In addition, any additional income that the players earn from endorsements, which don't run through the Bills, through investment earnings, or from other business opportunities that they may earn money from, would also be taxable to New York State. Every penny of that would be lost if the team moved to another community. So this pays for itself.
And then the real estate, I imagine, cascades down as well. Granted, houses may already be built, but the market for $1 million homes in Erie County is a little bit more when you got 20 guys out there that are football players.
Yeah, more like 50, but yes.
Okay, yeah.
And as we find out, many of them remain here after their careers are over. It happens over and over again. But yes, the team, it ripples through the real estate market. It ripples through sales tax. We've got 20 to 30% of the attendance, depending on who we're playing, are Canadians. Very large attendance from Pittsburgh when we play them, or from New York when we play the Jets. There's a lot of benefits to this area. It's not the highest rate of return that you would see on an economic development project, but it's a positive rate of return.
All right. Now, what about the psychological side of it all?
I grew up in New York City. I was born in Brooklyn, and I lived through the World Series win of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the next year they're leaving the community. It still rankles. It still hurts. The psychology in Brooklyn of a second-class place to Mammoth, Manhattan, is still there. And I was at Baseball Hall of Fame recently. The second most popular baseball cap that is sold at the Hall of Fame every year is the Brooklyn Dodgers baseball cap. Whoever won the World Series comes first, and then the Dodgers, year after year after year. And I bought one.
Okay.
I lived through the loss of a team to Los Angeles. This time around, Los Angeles is again in play as a potential place for a sports team in a community I live in.
Sure.
To leave. It hurts a lot.
And you're not the only one who has referred to this. Bring in Doris Kearns Goodwin if you can.
Yeah, Doris Kearns Goodwin is a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian. We grew up a couple towns apart. We didn't know each other, but we lived through these same experiences. And she wrote a very, very popular book called Wait Till Next Year, and it's a memoir of the Brooklyn Dodgers, who she rooted for, as did I. And she said, this is reading from her book, sometimes sitting in the park, and this is now in Boston where she lives, with my boys, I imagine myself back at Ebbets Field, a young girl, once more in the presence of my father, watching the players of my youth. Jackie Robinson, Duke Snider, Roy Campanella, Gil Hodges. There's magic in these moments, for when I open my eyes and see my sons in the place where my father once sat, I feel an invisible bond among our three generations, an anchor of loyalty and love linking my sons to the grandfather whose face they have not and never seen, but whose person they have come to know through these most timeless of sports. It means a lot to us. I talk to people who tell me over and over about being to their first football game with their father, as did the lieutenant governor when he was here recently, talked about being there. It links us together. It's part of our community.
And you are comfortable putting a dollar figure on that magic, on that feeling?
There have to be limits. We can't pay anything for that. but we should be willing to pay a reasonable amount, and I think we've done so.
All right, 803-0930 is the number. On the other side of the news break, we're going to delve into it more with Rich Tobe, Deputy Erie County Executive. We'll talk a little bit about what a week he's had, a lot of midnight phone calls, no doubt. We'll get into the lease, and now's the time to call, too, if you want to dash to your phones. We'll get to that in just a little bit. After the news break, we're going to run down the phone lines. He's with us till about 11:30, and then we transition into a discussion of the fiscal cliff. 803-0930 is the number. It's Hardline on News Radio 930 WBEN.
It's time to talk politics. It's Hardline on News Radio 930 WBEN. Now, here's WBEN's Dave Debo.
And what a week it is to talk politics. We are discussing the Buffalo Bills and their newly signed lease for Ralph Wilson Stadium with Erie County and the state. Deputy County Executive Rich Tobe is here. We're ready to take your calls. 803-0930 is the number. It's an 18-page document, the contract itself, but there are 41 different kind of supporting documents. There is a lot in there, is the point. And if there's something in there that you'd like to question, maybe why is it thus and such, or is there a clause in there that does this, you want to know more about the agreement, this is the guy that helped negotiate the deal. 803-0930 is the number. Maybe you're someone who says, hey, we should not be spending taxpayer money on this. This is the guy that can rebut those arguments. 803-0930 is the number. Let's kick it off this segment with the phones. Again, Rich Tobe is here, Deputy Erie County Executive. My name's Dave Debo. Joe in Buffalo, it's your turn. Hi.
How you doing, guys? Hey, according to his math, my taxes shouldn't go up at all. And he always says the public wants it. Nobody called me and ever asked me, why don't they have a vote on something like this when you're going to spend that kind of money and give it to teams that pay one player $100 million? I mean, come on. You know, enough is enough on the sports stuff.
Okay. In our form of democracy, we have the legislature that represents the people. These items will go before a vote of the Erie County Legislature.
So they still have to sign off on this before it actually happens?
Yes. What we signed was a memorandum of understanding, subject to the approval of the Erie County Legislature. There will then be a second bite of the apple when we go back to them with a full panoply of definitive documents, where they will also be asked to vote a second time. But we did, some years ago, this is when I was with County Executive Gorski, do a public opinion poll about the bills. This was in the 1990s. And about 90% of the public in those years really supported the bills. It was a massive outpouring of support.
Can't we argue, though, in the years since, anti-tax sentiment has risen?
Yes, of course it has.
Vis-a-vis the Tea Party.
Yes, the anti-tax sentiment was strong then. It's stronger now, I think. And there's more disappointment with the performance of the team on the field also. But we will see what happens when the public debate starts. We've laid out a proposal. There's an old saying that the executive proposes and the legislature disposes. We're confident they will approve this, but they will be holding hearings. They will. I'm prepared to go meet with the public and discuss this and describe the deal, and we'll see where the balance of opinion is as the legislature prepares for a vote. That probably will take place sometime in January.
803-0930 is our number. Hi, it's your turn. You're on the air.
Hey.
Hi, that's you. Yep.
Oh, Dave. Hey, John from Rochester. Listen, Rich.
Yeah.
You know, Ralph Wilson, in my opinion, you're getting criticism because of this giveaway to Ralph Wilson, but I take the opposite viewpoint, and I'll tell you why. Ralph Wilson has he's made a commitment to Buffalo, and he's lost probably $200 or $300 million by doing that. If he put that a team in the open market in the NFL, he would make probably 30 or 40% more as far as a sales price goes because of this market here. He's making a huge sacrifice by limiting his options. And I think you got to give it to Ralph Wilson. And what you had to do was necessary because he made a huge sacrifice. And I think it's time for the area and the state to make a sacrifice also. So I think it was a win-win situation. And I'm sure you agree with that. I thought you did a real good job in negotiating this deal.
Thank you, John. I've had two great bonuses from doing this negotiations. One is I got to meet Lieutenant Governor Duffy, your former mayor. He's a terrific man, a great sports fan and a Buffalo Bills fan, and representing Governor Cuomo has done a phenomenal job in helping us with this deal. Your main point, though, about Mr. Wilson is my other bonus. I've gotten to see him and to know him a little bit. He's sort of a throwback in his own right. I would take his handshake. If I would be happy to just take his handshake and say we've got a deal. Unfortunately, the times don't allow that. But he's been with us for 50 years here in Buffalo with this team. He bought it for $25,000. That was his entry price into the league. The team's worth at least $800 million now. We think if the team were sold now, almost all of that money, the $800 million, might be profit. But Ralph Wilson has told us he will never sell the team and will never move it from Buffalo as long as it's financially viable. We've believed him, and he's lived up to that.
Was there any discussion in the talks, in any regard, of succession plans?
We had to be conscious of Mr. Wilson's age. What we sought to do was to get a deal that will be binding upon Mr. Wilson, which was no problem. He agreed to that.
Yeah.
And whoever the new owner will be. There will be a new owner someday. We don't know when. Maybe it's longer than 10 years. We hope so. But if it's within this 10-year period, what we've negotiated will be binding upon the new owner. And so it's a deal with the franchise and the team, not with an individual.
How easy was it to get the team to agree to the, help me hear the numbers, 400 million?
400 million. Not hard at all.
Because in their mind, you think I'll be willing to forfeit $400 million as long as I am confident that I will never have to pay $400 million.
That's right.
That's the way they look at it?
I believe so. That it was not hard to get a very big price because I think in their eyes, they're never going to have to pay it because they don't intend to leave.
This might be asking you to betray confidences that you can't. And I'll give you a little wiggle room there. You can dance if you have to. But what was the sticking point? Was there something? Because I remember there was a while back when we thought, oh, gosh, we've got to extend it till April. We're not going to have a deal by the end of the year. Things look bleak. And then all of a sudden the heat turns on, and here we are. You had marathon meetings. It came together. Talk about the turning point. Talk about the sticking point that made things bleak then and how that was surmounted now.
They were never bleak in the sense I didn't think we'd get a deal. Every once in a while in your darkest fears. But no, we were confident we would have a deal. The Bills wanted it, the state wanted it, and we wanted it. Governor Cuomo was committed on the state's behalf to do their part, as were we, and the Bills wanted to stay. I was confident that someday we would get the deal. There were lots of little ups and downs, but first of all, what I like to say is that all is well that ends well. And the things that we were most concerned about, we overcame, mostly through good talks. But one of the setbacks, ironically enough, was Hurricane Sandy. That we were very close, and then, as was right, the governor's attention and that of his senior staff had to be turned to New York State's response to the disaster downstate, as we would expect them to turn to our aid if something like that happened here. So we lost about a month. But that was not because the deal was in jeopardy.
That wasn't content, that was logistics.
It was logistics. It was another event had occurred, and we fully supported the need for a rapid reply to the hurricane. We sent staff down there. We helped the state. Maybe it drew us a little closer together because of so much support we provided them. But in the end, we understood that. To the degree you can talk about it, what was the largest point of difference between, say, the county and the Bills? Well, the deal started at $228 million of stadium renovations, and we basically took $100 million out. And the question was the future of the stadium and how much money should go into a stadium that will be 51 years old when this lease expires. And at some point, we began to talk about the future. And was it wise to continue to put more money into that stadium, a lot more money, or begin to divert it towards a new stadium and a future home for the Buffalo Bills? That was a critical turning point when I think the Bills saw that was to their advantage as much as it was to ours. So talk a little bit about that. What is in there in regard to the future and someday having a stadium different from the one we've got now? There's a fund that was in this lease and in the prior one that is money that we pledge to continue to make improvements to the stadium each year, the way a landlord would. And we don't know quite what the items will be, but we've established a sum of money. During this 10 years, at the end of the 6th year, the county and state can take half of their contribution out, no questions asked, to begin to plan for a new stadium. That will give us enough time to figure out what we might want to do, and it will yield at least $11 million.
You've seen the cement studies. You know that this is a 40-year-old stadium. You think that's wise?
Yes, the stadium has more life in it than the 10 years if we continue to maintain it. But it's running its course on economic life. There are two things. Will it stand up, and can we have people in there safely? And the answer is yes, and probably at the end of 10 years also.
Does this plan in any way address site considerations? Yes, you're committed to reviewing the possibility of a new stadium. Do you review a new downtown stadium? Do you review another one somewhere in Orchard Park? Where does this new stadium end up being? The money will help us decide that. A committee is going to be formed to look at it. Committee won't be formed until at least the spring when we finish the deals. This still has to be approved by the National Football League when the final documents, those 41 documents, are all finished. But thereafter, we will begin to consider where to put a new stadium. Last time, when we did that public opinion survey, about a third of the people wanted the stadium where it is, a third wanted it in Buffalo, and a third wanted it somewhere else, north towns, eastern part of Erie County. We will consider all locations, but the governor's made it clear that he hopes we can find a site in Buffalo. I think that would be good if we could do it. And we will do a lot of work to see if we can find a site in the city of Buffalo that would work. Tell me more about that, because I haven't heard that before. The governor is pushing for one downtown? Yeah, the governor has been very, very supportive of the city of Buffalo. His $1 billion for Buffalo is part of it. He has made clear that the Buffalo Bills are part of the economic revitalization of this community. We cannot suffer a blow that would hurt our esteem and prestige. It's part of his overall vision for the community. And he has said he hopes it can be in Buffalo. Not committed to Buffalo, and it's a long time out. But he has made clear that his focus is on the 42 square miles of the city of Buffalo, if we can do it. 803-0930 is the number. Brendan in Orchard Park, thanks for dialing in.
Good morning, Mr. Tobe. I have to take issue with you on your statement that the Bills payroll over 10 years would generate $140 million in taxes from New York State. I believe your statement is deceitful for the following reason. Only approximately half of the games that the Bills play are played in New York State. The remaining ones are generally played in other states, or are played in other states, in fact. And those players will be able to go to those states and claim credit for those taxes that were paid. And New York, I don't believe, will collect that full $140 million. So although you say that that's slightly more than $135 million, I think that is a very misleading statement. I'm open to your comments.
Okay, well, thank you. These things are complicated, but here's how it works. The Bills, each player is obligated to 182 service days towards the team. All of those are generally within Erie County. It makes them New York State tax residents. You're right, when they play an away game, they may be taxed in the away state, and they'd get a credit for that. But the same thing happens when a player from an opposing team comes here and plays. They're taxed by New York State when they play at our stadium, creating roughly a wash. So that the game day payments are the same mostly either way. We're away half the time, we're home half the time. We collect the taxes from the visiting team the way they collect it when we're away. But,
thank you for your clarification.
But what ends up happening is that the total salary that the Bills are paid are not spread among 7 games, but are among their 182 days that they're here, and making them New York State tax residents. All right, great stuff. Glad you called. Call any time. Thank you. Enough time to squeeze in a couple more phone calls with Rich Tobe, Deputy Erie County Executive, the point man in all of those talks on the stadium. They reached a lease deal today. We're talking about that. Or Friday they reached it. We're talking about it today. Michael in Buffalo, go ahead. It's your turn.
Hi. The question I have is about who decides who's on this committee to study the new stadium, and how transparent will that research be? I'm very interested in this new proposal for an Outer Harbor Stadium by the Greater Buffalo Sports and Entertainment Complex, and concerned about the length of time they're staying in Orchard Park.
Yeah. Okay, so about 4 questions, Mike. First of all, the committee will be made up of appointees of Erie County, New York State, the Buffalo Bills, and if the NFL wishes to participate, they too can appoint somebody. But it's basically the state, county, and Bills who will be serving. We will have to find the right balance between transparency and confidentiality. The reason for that is that if we're beginning to look at a potential site, land values could skyrocket due to speculation about where the stadium might go, and we've got to be careful about not giving some people a heads up on driving up prices. So some of it would be confidential, most of it would be public, and anything that happens at the tail end, a decision, would be very public and significantly debated.
What about the proposal that's been put forth for the domed stadium in the Outer Harbor? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think America's a great place. People can make proposals, can do work, can add to the public debate. I think that's great.
But
we looked at that site, as we have looked at others, and I think there are enormous difficulties with it, primarily because of the transportation infrastructure that's there or likely to be available. To get out of the site going north, you have to take the Skyway. If we ever had a really bad storm on a game day, I don't know how people would ever get out. And in any event, the road infrastructure is very weak, and even with their proposed subway line or mass transit line going in there, it's not possible to pull enough people out of there as fast as they would want to go on the public transit. So they thought hard about it. They've got some nice parts to their proposal, but I think the location is just plain too confined. It's a little small also. It's about 150 acres, and our current stadium is about 200. But putting that aside, I just don't think the transportation system works, either going north or south, and no ability to go east or west. So I think it's too confined and will be too heavily impacted by the weather.
I think a lot of the thought in that particular site was this would be an event center in an area that needs events. The idea of a more than a football stadium, incorporating a convention center, having a lot more activity in the downtown area, and oh, by the way, we have this huge plot of land that happens to be the Outer Harbor.
I'm sure that was the thinking, and making it a comprehensive use was attractive. Bringing hotels in is a hard part of this. You need hotels for convention centers. But fundamentally, sharing infrastructure and using it so that parking and public expenses are used among multiple uses, if I can say it that way, is a good thought. But everything has to work.
The First Niagara Center has a ramp of its own, but also adjoining lots that are used by the banks and the businesses during the day.
Yes,
and that's the kind of scenario you're talking about here?
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, that's the ideal. That's what's happened in the major cities where they have downtown venues. Often a football and baseball stadium sharing space and sharing parking, just the way First Niagara not only has its own parking and then uses adjoining parking. During the day, people use their parking for downtown workers.
All right. I'm going to ask for a little forbearance. I don't know if you have something you need to be to after this?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. We've got a couple calls on hold. Bob in Clarence Center, thanks for holding. We got you in.
You're welcome. Well, I'm really offended by this political double talk from this Eddie Haskell character. I bet he's going to have a very nice warm seat at the stadium, and I'll bet those union construction workers and construction companies will be donating to his political campaign heavily, and lots of dinners and adult beverages will go down as they decide who's going to get this contract with our tax money. And the baloney about half from the state and half from the local government is nonsense. It's all our money. It's our tax money. People don't move here for football. They move here for low taxes. So all he's doing is just make a nice little toy for himself and his buddies to have a great afternoon with his family in his nice warm seats and on our tax money. It's a lot of baloney, just a lot of double talk.
All right, what do you say, Rich? Let's talk about the contractor. How was that picked?
Well, the contractor will pick through competitive bidding. It's the way we do all public works projects that are covered by state and local law. I don't have a heated seat. I don't have a seat at the stadium. We used to have, my wife and family used to share tickets. We don't now, but we paid for them ourselves.
But what about the broader political argument that the caller made maybe more forcefully than I will? The idea that this is all politics, that this is just different groups coming together to sort of salt their own.
We think the public wants this. We did the opinion poll so many years ago, and it seemed that way. It seems that way today. I shudder to think what would have happened if the team were to leave, and what this community would feel like and how it would react. We believe this is what the public wants. The county legislature will help us determine that when they vote. But we think this is not only a fiscally responsible deal, but it's a good one for the community also.
And what about the caller's argument that segregating out the state portion and the county portion is really kind of specious because it is all our taxpayer dollars?
It's all our taxpayers' dollars, but some of it, the state share, would not be coming to this community. but for this deal. That, to be sure, the state would collect it, but they're directing more of it here than would have been the case otherwise.
So the fact that Robin Hood steals from us in this caller's mind, the fact that Robin Hood is stealing from us, to your mind, is okay as long as he's giving back to us.
Well, I'm not quite sure I'd use that metaphor to describe my feelings about the state, but taxes would not go down if we didn't do this deal. Double negative, but taxes would remain where they are with or without the deal.
All right.
But the state money is now coming to us when it otherwise would not have.
All right. Last call. Let's squeeze in Brian in Buffalo. Thanks for waiting. It's your turn now.
Hi. When you're talking about the economic impact, and you're quoting numbers that, for cash flow purposes, you understand cash flow outlays for the project versus what we're going to bring in on an economic impact over the next 10 years. Are you quoting numbers that are discounted for present value?
No, actually, it's the opposite. What we ended up doing was I just used the current value trended brought forward as if there was no inflation.
So there is no there is no factor in there for cost of capital or for present value of cost of borrowing. So you're saying that these are numbers that don't take into effect any inflation or any present value.
Let me. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. I didn't mean to. But let me be clear. The numbers that I thought you were asking me about were the payments that the state will be collecting from the team's personal income tax payments. We did not trend those forward with an inflation-based estimate. So the actual collection. We're
talking about two different things there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're talking about two different things. I'm talking about the present value. When you say, okay, cash flow out, so $10 million or $100 million today that we're going to spend on an outlay. And then you're talking about, okay, tax dollars that come back in, you're not present valuing those numbers. So $1 10 years out or whatever, okay, $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, if you understand the concept of present value.
Sure, of course.
Bottom line it for us, Brian. We're almost out of time here.
Doing that. Bottom line is you're not doing that.
Well, we did it. We did it with some of the numbers, not with all of them.
The ones you're quoting today.
Some of the ones I quoted today, we did it with. The $130 million is
you're mixing apples and oranges, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. The $130 million. Yeah. The $130 million does not include the cost of the money. That's the cost of building the stadium, of the improvements, and we don't have within that number the cost of the money.
Of capital.
That's right. That's not in there. In some of the other numbers, we do have inflation-based estimates, but not in that one.
When you're quoting numbers like that, you're mixing apples and oranges. It sounds to me to make your argument, as opposed to the other side. Whereas if you actually did a cash flow projection and you figured out all those assumptions, and I guess really the question comes down to is how transparent is this going to be then? Because your arguments are specious because they're not transparent. You're mixing apples and oranges. Number one, you're making it sound like okay. We're going to make all this money over the next 10 years. That's not present value, the numbers you're quoting today. And you're not also including in there the cost of capital. So those numbers that you're quoting are necessarily specious. I don't mean to be pejorative here.
Yeah, no, we get you.
What I'm saying.
The argument is a lot bigger than the time we have left, so I'm going to have to let you go. But basically, Rich, you're saying that the return on investment is based on certain numbers. He's arguing that those aren't valid numbers because you haven't accounted always for inflation.
Neither of the numbers have inflation in it. The $130 million of construction costs doesn't have inflation, and the amount that the bills will be paying does not have inflation in it. We believe the cost, the payments that the players make, and based upon past trends, will go up far faster than inflation.
So what kind of faith can we have in the return on investment portion of these numbers in light of what the caller is saying?
We think we've understated the true value of this team to the community and to the state, because what we've not done. I mean, the player salaries have gone up far faster than the rate of inflation. We did not include a forward-looking estimate on that over the next 10 years.
Dear son, happy.
And if you lay the two of them out, the low interest rate we're going to get now, because of this very low interest rate environment, is going to be far less than the inflation that occurs with the players. But we didn't know what number to use as we look forward into player contracts and player salaries.
All right. This topic is a lot bigger. I should have had you in for the full 2 hours.
Okay.
Well, as it gets to public hearing time, we'll try to do this again. Glad you were able to be here. Public hearing time, we'll try to do this again. Glad you were able to be here. Public hearing time, we'll try to do this again. Glad you were able to be here. Public hearing time, we'll try to do this again. Glad you were able to be here. Public hearing time, we'll try to do this again. Glad you were able